We like to think we know right from wrong. Most of the time it feels simple. Help a stranger, keep a promise, don't lie. But philosophy has a habit of taking that simple feeling and turning it inside out. Imagine you're not just living your life. Imagine you're standing over a trapdoor, or holding a steering wheel, or trapped on a lifeboat with no food. Suddenly, the rules you thought were solid start to wobble. This is not an abstract academic game. It's a map of your own moral instincts. And the journey begins with a runaway trolley. Part 1, the driver's choice. You are the driver of a trolley car. The brakes have failed. Ahead, 5 workers are on the main track. If you do nothing, they will all die. But there's a side track. On that side track is 1 worker. Your steering wheel works. You can turn the trolley onto the side track, killing 1 person instead of 5. What is the right thing to do? If you ask a room full of people, the vast majority say turn the trolley. 1 death is better than 5. It feels almost mathematical. It would be wrong to let 5 die when you could save them by sacrificing 1. That reason is powerful. It's the logic of consequences. We might call it better to save more lives, even if it means taking 1. Now let's test that logic, because consistency is the price of a real moral principle. Part 2, the fat man on the bridge. This time you are not the driver. You are an onlooker on a footbridge overlooking the track. Again, a runaway trolley is heading toward 5 workers. Again, the brakes have failed. And you notice, standing next to you, leaning over the railing, is a very large man. If you push him off the bridge, he will fall onto the track and die. But his body will stop the trolley, saving the 5. Same principle, right? 1 life to save 5. Now take a poll. Most people will not push the fat man. Their hands stay down. Why? The principle hasn't changed. The outcome is identical. 1 dies, 5 live. So what shifted? A student named Andrew offers an answer. In the first case, you're steering a runaway thing. In the second, you are actively pushing someone with your own hands. That feels like murder. But is that a real difference? In both cases, you make a conscious choice. In both cases, someone who would have lived dies because of your action. Perhaps the difference isn't in the consequences, but in the act itself. We have a gut feeling that some things are just wrong. Categorically wrong, no matter. How many lives do they save? So now we have 2 competing moral frameworks. Consequentialist morality is about outcomes. Maximize the good lives saved, happiness increased. Categorical morality is about duties and rights. Some acts killing an innocent person are forbidden, even for a greater good. Let's see if you hold both views, because that's where things get uncomfortable. Part 3, the doctor's dilemma. To test your instincts further, consider 2 medical cases. Case A, you are a doctor. 6 people are brought in after a trolley wreck. 5 have moderate injuries. 1 is critical. You can either spend the day saving the 1, but the 5 will die. Or you can treat the 5, but the 1 will die. What do you do? Again, most people save the 5. Case B, you are a transplant surgeon. 5 patients need organs, heart, lung, kidney, liver, pancreas. They will die without transplants. In the next room, a healthy young man is sleeping after a routine checkup. You could quietly take his 5 organs. He would die, but 5 would live. Do you do it? Almost no one raises a hand. The room goes quiet. Why? The arithmetic is identical. 1 life for 5. But something about yanking out organs from an innocent person, someone not even in the path of danger, feels like a violation of a deeper rule. It's not just consequentialism anymore. It's about rights, about using a person as a means to an end, and that distinction between saving and killing, between indirect harm and direct use, is the heartbeat of moral philosophy. Part 4, real life, the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens. Hypotheticals are fine, but real life is sharper. In 19th century England, a case emerged that law students still debate. The yacht Mignonette sank in the South Atlantic. 4 men escaped to a lifeboat. Captain Dudley, first mate Stevens, a sailor named Brooks, and a 17-year-old cabin boy, Richard Parker. Parker was an orphan on his first long voyage against the advice of his friends. But they had no water. They had 2 cans of turnips. For 3 days, they ate nothing. Then they caught a turtle. Then for 8 more days, nothing. Parker, desperate, drank seawater. He grew sick and lay in the bottom of the boat near death. On the 19th day, Dudley suggested a lottery. Draw lots to see who would die so the others could live. Brooks refused. No lots were drawn. The next day, with no ship in sight, Dudley told Brooks to look away. He said a prayer over Parker, then killed him with a penknife, stabbing him in the neck. For 4 days, the 3 men fed on Parker's body and blood. Then they were rescued, Dudley wrote in his diary with stunning detachment. On the 24th day, as we were having our breakfast, a ship appeared at last. They were arrested and tried. Their defense? Necessity. Better that one dies so 3 could live. Now you are the jury. Morally, guilty or not guilty. The defense. A student named Marcus speaks for the defense. In a situation that desperate, you do what you have to do. 19 days without food. Someone has to make the sacrifice. Besides, those 3 men had families. They could go home and start charities. Who knows? The cabin boy had no dependents. In the end, society is better off. This is pure Bentham. Maximize overall happiness. Count everyone affected, the sailors, their wives, their children. Add it up. The scales tip toward killing Parker. The prosecution. Another student, Britt, disagrees. No situation allows human beings to take fate into their own hands. We don't have that power. Murder is murder. This is the categorical objection. It doesn't matter that 3 lives were saved. Some lines should never be crossed. But then the discussion gets more interesting. The consent objection. A student named Kathleen asks, what if Parker had agreed? What if he said, go ahead, I'm dying anyway? Would that make it morally permissible? A surprising number of people now raise their hands. Consent changes things. But why? Because if Parker chooses to sacrifice himself, he is no longer a victim. He becomes an agent. He grants permission. And permission transforms an act of murder into perhaps an act of tragic sacrifice. But even here, objections arise. Another student pushes back. Even with consent, it's still wrong. Because once you start down that road, where does it stop? If you kill Parker and aren't rescued, do you kill the next weakest? And the next? Until no one is left? Part 5. The 3 questions that remain. Let's step out of the lifeboat and look at what we've uncovered. In the debate over Dudley and Stevenson, we heard 3 distinct objections to the simple utilitarian. Logic of 1 dies, so 5 live. And each objection points to a deeper philosophical question. Question 1. The categorical objection. The claim, murder is always wrong, regardless of consequences. But why? Is it because human beings have rights? The cabin boy had a right not to be killed, even if his death would save 3 others. But where do those rights come from? If not from the calculation of overall happiness, Bentham's view, then from where? Do we have rights because we are rational beings? Because we can choose? Or do rights simply exist as moral facts independent of utility? This is the territory of Immanuel Kant, the great philosopher of categorical moral reasoning. For Kant, morality is not about maximizing happiness. It's about respecting persons as ends in themselves, never merely as means. Question 2. The fair procedure objection. The claim, a lottery would make it okay. Why would a fair procedure justify a terrible outcome? Because everyone had an equal chance? Because everyone agreed to the rules in advance? This line of thinking leads to social contract theory. Thinkers like John Locke and later John Rawls argue that the legitimacy of an act, even a life and death decision, can come from the consent of the governed under fair terms. But can you consent to being killed? And if the lottery is fair, does that transform a murder into something like a tragic draft? Question 3. The consent objection. The claim. If Parker freely agreed, it would be okay. What is the moral magic of consent? Why does an act that is wrong without consent, taking an organ, taking a life, become permissible with consent? Because consent respects autonomy. It treats the person not as a thing to be used, but as a chooser. In the medical world, this is the principle of informed consent. In law, it's the difference between battery and a handshake. But how free is consent on a sinking lifeboat? And can consent ever justify killing or only lesser harms? Part 6. Why this matters and why it's uncomfortable. At this point, it's tempting to throw up your hands. If Aristotle, Kant, Bentham, and Mill haven't settled these questions in 2,000 years, who are we to solve them in a single class? That's the escape hatch of skepticism. The idea that morality is just a matter of personal opinion, that there's no truth, no reasoning, only feelings. But Kant himself warned against this. He called skepticism a resting place for human reason, a place to pause, but not a place to live. Because if you truly give up on moral reasoning, You also give up on condemning clear wrongs. You cannot say murder is wrong with any conviction. You can only say, I don't like it. And the deeper problem is this: we live the answers to these questions every day. Every time you decide how to vote on healthcare, you are weighing lives against resources. Every time you support a war or oppose one, you are judging consequences against absolute rules. Every time you sign a contract or make a promise, you are invoking consent and procedure. Philosophy does not give you new information. It takes what you already know from your own life, from news stories, from quiet intuitions, and makes it strange. It estranges you from the familiar, and once the familiar turns strange, it never looks quite the same again. Part 7. The risk of thinking. There is a personal risk here. Self-knowledge is like lost innocence. You cannot unsee the contradictions in your own beliefs. You cannot stop noticing the times you rely on consequences in one case and categorical rules in another. There is also a political risk. Socrates' friend Calicos warned him, philosophy is a pretty toy if indulged in with moderation, but if pursued too far, it is absolute ruin. Take my advice, abandon argument. Go to business school. Get a reputation. Calicles had a point. Philosophy does distance you from settled assumptions. It does make you a worse citizen before it makes you a better one, because it teaches you to question the very conventions that hold society together. And yet, the questions will not leave you alone. They recur because they are unavoidable. You can refuse to study philosophy, but you cannot refuse to live a philosophy. Every choice you make, every vote, every purchase, every relationship embodies an answer to the question, what is the right thing to do? Conclusion: awakening the restlessness of reason. The aim of this journey is not to give you final answers. It is to awaken the restlessness of reason, to show you that the tension between consequences and categories, between numbers and rights, between consent and coercion is not a flaw in morality. It is morality. The trolley problem will never be solved. The fat man will never be universally pushed. The cabin boy's ghost will always haunt the courtroom. But in arguing about them in hearing, Marcus and Britt and Kathleen and Matt, you are not just debating abstractions. You are practicing self-knowledge. You are rehearsing the arguments you will have with yourself. Late at night when the real dilemmas come, and they will come, not always as a runaway trolley, but as a choice at work, a conversation with a friend, a moment on a jury, a vote in an election. When that moment arrives, you will not have a philosopher beside you. You will only have your own reasons, tested and refined by stories you thought were just hypotheticals. And that is the point.